Welcome everyone. Do you hear me?
Yes, very well. Welcome.
Welcome. Thank you very much for joining. Thanks. As I see, we can start already. So let me share my screen first. Okay. Okay. Hello again. Thank you very much for joining. This is webinar number 3 of IP Pioneers, the Intellectual Property Practitioners Consortium. Today we have two outstanding guest speakers for our webinar, Mr. Dr. Raul Rodriguez and Dr. Andres Guadamus. And we have a very hot topic also. Today we are going to talk about artificial intelligence and the related intellectual property rights challenges. Let me introduce you the agenda for today. I will start about the introduction of our consortium. I'm going to introduce our dear speakers. Then we will have two presentations by our speakers, and we will have question and answers. We can do also questions right after the first speaker. Let me start about IP Pioneers. So we are a group, we are a worldwide consortium of intellectual property practitioners, and we are very passionate about IPR, and we are willing to share expertise and best practices to enhance IP awareness and promote innovation. We see ourselves in the future as a highly efficient worldwide consortium of IP experts with a strong network, and we would like to develop a digital platform for IP related and business development models. And our objective is to bridge the gap between knowledge and management of intellectual property and to build an effective business model for every client. So let me start with our first speaker, Dr. Raul Rodriguez. Thank you very much again, Dr. Rodriguez, for the participation in our webinar. Mr. Rodriguez is Dean of the School of Business at Woxan University in India. He has PhD in Artificial Intelligence and Robotics Process Automation applications in human resources. He has expertise in machine learning, deep learning, natural language processing, computer vision, robotic process automation. He's a registered expert in artificial intelligence, and he's a nominee for the Forbes 30 Under 30 Europe 2020 list. He's also author of 2 books, and he has over 70 publications. Our second guest, Mr. Andres Guadamus. So thank you, Mr. Guadamus, for joining us and for being ready to present in our webinar. Mr. Guadamus is senior lecturer in intellectual property law at the University of Sussex. He's editor-in-chief of the Journal of World Intellectual Property. His research areas are artificial intelligence and copyright, open licensing, cryptocurrencies, and smart contracts. He's also author of a book. He writes blogs at technolama.co.uk, and he's an international consultant for WIPO. He has expertise in open source software, information technology law, software patents, social media, intellectual property, cryptocurrency, blockchain, and originality. And about our topic. So today we are touching very hot topic, artificial intelligence and related IPR challenges. As you know, artificial intelligence is evolving fast. And it's used in creating art and music and also solving technical problems. Therefore, the growth of AI is raising fundamental questions of the existing IP system. So, do AI-generated works and inventions fit into the current IP system? How should the value of human creation and innovation and the value of AI creation and innovation be balanced? So, these are some of the topics which we are going to touch today. So, I don't like to talk too much, and I would like to give the floor to our first speaker, Mr. Raul Rodriguez. Thank you very much.
Hi, thank you so much for the introduction, and really glad to see everyone here. Let me just first set the screen, and we'll continue with the presentation. All right, I assume you can see my screen successfully. One of you may answer, and I will proceed.
Yes,
we can.
Perfect. Yes.
All right.
Perfect.
Yes.
Great. All right. So let me brief you very quickly. Today's topic is going to be partially technical, partially non-technical. I do not have expertise in of course, law and regulation in general terms, but I do have quite an understanding in terms of IPR, and especially copyright or patent-related aspects when it comes to AI or similar areas of that. What are we going to cover today is mainly the key aspects which I believe you should have an understanding about. One is what is really artificial intelligence, not what we have been told it is, but what it really is about. Something which I've been feeling that working professionals as well as students have missed across the journey of utilizing social media, reading the news, of course getting influenced by all these massive number of webinars that happened through this lockdown and coronavirus pandemic. And there has been a bit of a gap on that, so I will try to reach that, what you believe AI is and what it really is about. Then what kind of emerging opportunities are there for mainly startups or SMEs. So we'll work a bit on the simplification part with some real life examples. Similarly, on a similar line is how existing business owners can really utilize this tool to improve the profitability of a company. And as we move towards the last part of the presentation, I will jump into the IPR regulatory aspects when it comes to AI, and then some key questions which I will have for you, which are part of my research, but for which I still don't have a fruitful answer. So, of course, it will be always interesting to see your views on the same. So, if we proceed, what exactly is artificial intelligence? Some of you might have a brief understanding about it, but for me to comprehend exactly what you think about it, I would like you to go to this website, menti.com, all right? Take down this code you can see on the screen, because in order to open the browser and see the live responses from your end, I need to stop sharing the screen and share it again. So please do go to this site, note down the code 7998549, and go to the site. Let me open it. I'm going to stop sharing the screen now, and I will share it back with the open board.
The code didn't work. Can you?
Yeah, the code will work. Just 1 minute. I'm opening it.
Maybe I just wrote it down wrong.
Yeah, there's 1 minute. The problem with the stack at times change the code automatically. So that is the issue. I'll leave it to you, no issues. Alright, so the new code will be, if you all can hear me correctly, 8373779. Right? 8373779.
Yes, now it's open.
Yeah. All right, great. So I'll share the screen now, so you can see the open poll in my screen as well. All right. So here you have a question. What is AI according to you? I gave various options, so you can really load similar options on this regard, and we'll see what image or perception you have about the same. So far I see 5 responses and going up. And what I can see in the screen, okay. Interesting terms you have in mind, not very far from the actual discipline. Most of you agree that this is based on maths, based on statistics, based on code. Some have come across with robot, numbers, evolution, okay. Future, okay. Progress, yeah. Okay, so from the responses I can see so far, I can draw conclusions that you're all clear that it has to do with some sort of mathematics, statistics, algebra, to be more exact, and of course statistics of various sorts. Programming language is also present in this category. You comprehend that machine learning or AI has to do with creating new disciplines or new aspects. Not exactly creating new things, but more of analyzing past data rather than creating new data. But yeah, related to progress, correct? And it's a software indeed. Okay. All right. The answers so far seem interesting and progressive, rather than what I've obtained in similar webinars in the past, even from my own students. So it's interesting to see your answers and that we are all on the same page in this category. So I'll give you a few seconds to place any further terms as you wish, and then we'll close this poll and we'll share back the screen. But everyone seems to be on similar lines. All right, wonderful. Let's just go back to the presentation. It's been insightful indeed to see what views you have about the same, and of course what you believe machine learning has to do with it. So now seeing what you think about it, this will of course help me to progress further in the presentation in some way or the other, whichever way I wish to take earlier. So now we'll know how to orient it. So to give you a quick brief about how exactly AI has been portrayed mainly on social media or various news channels, if most of you have already understood that AI, or so-called AI, has to do with maths and statistics, true. What has happened some years ago, approximately 10, 12 years ago, is that around that frame of statistics, we drew another frame, and we called it machine learning. Ultimately, machine learning is basic analytics in an advanced way, utilizing various programming languages. But it has nothing to do with creating new aspects, but more of analyzing past data and finding patterns. Now, what has happened, especially on the social spectrum of publicizing it, in public terms, calling it artificial intelligence seemed to be much more attractive to others. It was selling much more, and as a buzzword, it was really much more insightful in that regard. So, machine learning, which is the actual term, analyzing past data and finding patterns in order to get an output, has been named as artificial intelligence. Now, what we actually call artificial intelligence today, it doesn't exist. What we are calling it is machine learning, which is what we actually have. Artificial general intelligence, or AGI, it's an aspect which we have not reached to yet. That will be a reality where, in this case, algorithms will be able to develop certain cognitive abilities beyond the human spectrum, beyond our own abilities. So we have not reached there yet. In my opinion, we are still at least 15 to 20 years away from that, despite of what Elon Musk of the world may claim about the same. We're still some distance away from that, so it will take some time, certainly. And so far, the development is pretty slow, though it might seem pretty fast because that's how it's been sold. It is not very fast. It's quite a slow pace at the moment, so we really need to catch up on that. Certainly, COVID-19 and the lockdown period has somewhat increased the speed because it has enabled technological tools to develop much faster. That is true, but still, despite of this, we are way slower than where we would like to be. So, if you look at any sort of definition when it comes to the regulations of AI, there is no actual definition. There are tentative definitions, but there is no dictionary-based definition that we can all agree is true and correct. Many people believe that AI or machine learning is some cool aspect that computers might be able to perform and that humans cannot perform, which is not exactly true. On the other hand, Hollywood and the movie industry has not done any favor to this field of computer science and mathematics, mainly because with movies such as Terminator or iRobot that you all know, it has created a social stigma around this technological development that resembles to be a threat to us, which is also not true in certain ways, despite of what many people chose to believe. So ultimately, this is what exactly people like me, professionals like me, even faculty, academic teams feel when somebody claims that artificial intelligence or machine learning will really take over certain aspects of the world. You can see we have certain algorithms called neural networks, and when we are trying to train the neural network to identify either a dog or a cat, and even the neural network makes mistakes identifying between animals the differences, having other individuals, other even governments or corporates believing that yes, AI or machine learning will really revolutionize the world in the next 5 to 10 years, it's a bit off the plate in realistic terms. So this is a reality that we need to embrace and really ingrain that we are still years light from such reality. And yes, it's true that artificial intelligence may take and probably will take over certain jobs, but these jobs will be of administrative / clerical nature. So that will happen because there will be an automation process. So all these jobs will certainly be somewhat not replaced, but develop into other roles. So machine learning will take over these existing roles, but humans will have to develop their own skills, upskill themselves into another reality. So that's just something which is going to happen. It's nothing outstanding because it has happened throughout all the industrial revolutions in the past as well. So it's nothing new, but we are trying to make a huge deal of it when it's actually not. So we have to understand this. Its upskilling process in society is very much required. As I said, it has happened in the past as well. So we need to embrace it with the best of heart we can, and of course move forward in this progression or evolution. So when we look at exactly tentative definitions which may be placed around the term of AI or ML, one could be the task that computers may perform without the guidance of a user, which is actually the tentative reality which tends to happen most of the time. On the other hand, there is a learning called reinforcement learning, where the machine may learn from trial and error. This happens mainly in the healthcare industry when we use algorithms to identify certain conditions such as cancer. So it will learn from trial and error based on identification patterns, based on accuracy, and based on the error margin percentage that it gets from each X-ray analysis. So these are the two main tentative definitions that we can highlight. But again, there is no officially made definition that we can really claim as of now. And it's difficult to define because it really is a very open-ended term in this regard. Just to quickly run you through the subtypes of what you can call machine learning, so it's types of learning. I'm not going to run through all the definitions. This is for you to have a visual. But overall, we normally understand as four types of learning. One is supervised, one is unsupervised, one is transfer, and the other one is reinforcement learning. Now, when we talk about supervised and unsupervised, what we call supervised learning is that learning where a human being is assisting the machine, the algorithm, and is providing labels to the data which is being entered. So if we enter data of, again, cats and dogs, we are entering one column with cats, one column with dogs, and then the type of dog breed. If it will be unsupervised, we will have no categories within. It will be all mix and match. All the images will be completely mixed up, and the machine will have to understand how to classify them in base of our previous pattern. If we look at reinforcement learning, this is exactly how we learn as kids, or even how we teach our pets where to do their necessities. We teach by trial and error or reward and punishment, which is a very basic and original psychology experiment, which at the end in psychology there's also called reinforcement learning. It comes from the field of psychology and liberal arts. So this is the trial and error learning which comes across. I see there's a question in the chat. I could hear the buzz. Let me just minimize it and go to the chat and check. Okay. Yeah, I'll answer questions once it's done. No issues at all. So if we move a bit forward in what are the emerging opportunities for startups, the main aspects which you need to highlight in terms of startups development and global ideas will be these fields that you have in your screen. Most of them you're already familiar with, and you have probably seen some startups already growing in that field, but others not so much, such as quantum or even robotics. Bear in mind that most startups tend to merge these fields. For example, blockchain with augmented reality, or cryptocurrencies with virtual reality, and so on and so forth. So these fields within the technological spectrum are the main future, and ultimately the key of the future will be quantum computing. If we look at fields, what fields in the industry can these startups really grow in the next 5 to 10 years? These fields you can see on your screen will be the main ones. I will show you some examples so you can have an idea on how these startups normally tend to run or could run. So if you look at healthcare, we take this image. Of course, this is a sample image. So for COVID prediction based on X-rays of the thorax of the patient, we can identify whether there is a healthy pneumonia patient or a COVID-19 patient based on the analysis. So we will have a data set of, let's say, some 500 X-rays, and we'll load the data into the system, into the algorithm, and we'll teach the algorithm with reinforcement learning how to detect it. Then we will develop an app in form of a startup, of a company, and this app or product will be sold to hospitals, healthcare centers, governments, and so on. So this is one field where within healthcare, this industry can really grow. Of course, COVID-19 is hopefully will be a temporary thing, but beyond COVID, there will probably be, for good or bad, some future diseases which may come across in the real world, and hence industry will have to come across with other new ideas to tackle this. Another example, which I will show you, this has been developed by me and one of my students. This is for cancer recognition and identification. So let me just show you very quickly, because the video when I'm sharing screen may pause. So you will see that we are going to load files of X-ray images from maybe the brain, maybe skin cancer, maybe even lung cancer, any sort of pituitary cancer, and we load this image into the system. We'll train the system, and after we load a sample image like this one, the system will tell us exactly what type of cancer it is, what is the stage in which the cancer is, for example, 1, 2, 3, 4, and what is the probability, if it's a healthy patient, what is the probability that it will develop cancer in whichever amount of years, and how fast will it develop also. So all this, we obtain the data from over 10,000 X-ray images. So we have collected the data over a period of time from various sources, and we train the system. We of course remove images which are inaccurate, and that increase the overall accuracy of the results. But this is a clear sample of what companies or startups in this case can really come across with. New ideas, new applications of machine learning in this case. If you look at payments, digital payments, which have really grown within this time of lockdown, because of course cash transactions were kind of banned, socially speaking, because exchanging of money physically could be a medium of contagion. So various applications have developed. If you look at India, where I reside, there were many companies that came up suddenly during lockdown with new ideas, new ways, new methods of payment, and even already established companies like Google Pay and PayPal, they came up with new methodologies, new ways of rewarding the users, even new ways of connecting the users database in their mobile phone with their payment app. And all of this was even linked further with their passport number and so on and so forth. So they have come across in a way that basically having a mobile app to make digital payments was almost a need, not an option any longer. And on the international spectrum, something similar took place as well. Even the all established or old school established companies such as American Express or even the credit card, debit card based MasterCard and Visa came out with their own digital based or e-cards, which basically instead of having the physical card, you will have it on your mobile app, and you will pay to do that through a QR code or maybe an RFID. There will be various methods for it, and there are banks like BBVA, which is a Spanish bank, has come across with a new innovative way of having your card in your mobile app. Just go to the store, run the app through the system, and your payment processes automatically. So all these aspects have been further linked with dynamics of technology such as blockchain, such as AI, because it will monitor your activities, it will track it down, even the locations where you make your payments, and so on and so forth. There are various aspects that could be covered here, but since we are a bit short of time, this is some overall spectrum. If you look at transportation, you all know about intelligent transportation. I don't think there's anything else to say. You all know about Tesla and autonomous vehicles. But you can see on your screen how autonomous vehicles are normally established. Various multiple 360-degree cameras and radars and LiDAR, which help the vehicle monitor distance with other objects or pedestrians. And why will this be the future for startups? Is because in this case you're utilizing, in the one hand, robotics, on the other hand, machine learning, and lastly, of course, augmented reality is also implemented, as you will see in this video. So you will see augmented reality is being utilized to measure the distance between vehicles. The color will change depending on how close you may be to that vehicle. It will also measure who the person is, the speed that you are going at, the speed that the other vehicle is going at, and in this case, of course, was a trial circuit, but in real life, it will measure exactly what all the parameters are required with an augmented reality tool. So all this is something certainly innovative, but this is applied in the real world scenario on daily basis, can somewhat maybe increase our safety and for security in the role. On the other hand, we are going to move a bit into the HR field. I hope you enjoy this part, though there is a bit of a controversy here. Why do I say there's a bit of a controversy? Is because this was mainly my research. The controversy I face is that there are certain countries like the EU, for example, with the IPR, where there are various difficulties to measure and track down employees' data. However, in countries like India, even Singapore, you have a bit of a free hand for this. So let me show you what I mean. This is a fashion analysis which is being used as during interviews. There are various tools for this, various AI-enabled cameras are also there. So what this tool does, it measures emotional responses, and this is useful on the one hand for measuring truthfulness of the responses, on the other hand, satisfaction of the candidate or even the employees when you have internal interviews is also helpful, and obviously to know the overall perception about that person from your end. It helps you understand their psyche on an outside perspective. On the other hand, beyond their facial recognition, you have their voice analysis. So voice analysis is one part which comes along with the facial recognition. Which comes along with the facial recognition, and this will measure the tonality, the pitch, the speed they speak at, and various other aspects, which will be then merged with the facial recognition analysis and give you an output that this person might be truthful in this question answer or not, might be feeling X or Y, and what may be the reason. So there is a bit of a controversy in terms of privacy, which we will discuss later anyway, but this is happening, so it's nothing which is still under grabs. It's very much out there in the market, but only in certain countries. On the other hand, there is something called sentiment analysis. Now, here we analyze mainly what is the greeting activity of these employees, how they feel in terms of polarity, positive or negative, and whether what they are expressing is an opinion or is a fact. So this is normally helpful to understand how is the employee overall in our overall spectrum, and what kind of comments they pass around about, let's say, our company, or about their colleagues, or their teammates, or even the management. So there are various tools applicable here. This is what MNCs like Google, for example, utilize to analyze your reviews on Google Reviews, or TripAdvisor, or Airbnb, or Booking.com. So they analyze what have you written, they run the algorithm, and they get results accordingly, and then they make marketing campaigns, or they might approach with ads in a particular way, some way or the other. On the other hand, we look at candidate and employee engagement. Here I'm just going to run quickly through it because it's something that you know very well, which is called chatbot. So a chatbot, which is a 24/7 enabled tool, which will help candidates as well as employees being connected with the company, and of course get assistance on various matters such as human resources, or maybe salary slips, or any sort of statements or letters they might require from the company, which might take a couple of days to be sent by the human HR person. It will take a matter of seconds to be sent by the chatbot. So these are advanced chatbots, not the ones you might be used to interact with on various websites. These are a bit more extensive in terms of development, and obviously the pricing also increases along the way. Another aspect could be training and development within HR. Here, what the system will do, it will analyze the profile of employees on various social media platforms as well as their curriculum, the CV, and it will track down what are the skill gaps. These skill gaps will be proposed with various courses or training material, and we will make sure that employees are only trained in the gaps they have and not having common trainings for everybody, which is what normally happens. We will have individual, personalized, and very concentrated trainings for each person. So it's something very helpful that companies really appreciate because it saves cost mainly and time. And another aspect will be employee attrition. So there is various tools for this on machine learning. So one of them, what we'll do, we will run certain data on the system. The data will be mainly measuring levels of satisfaction, how many years they have spent at the company, what is the salary, for what department they work, whether they have been promoted or not, and other aspects which you will see here. So some of the aspects will be how far they live from the office, means how much they have to commute daily. So depending on that, depending on the education level, depending on whether they work X number of hours or not, what is their job role, the department, so on and so forth, there will be a general understanding by the algorithm that this individual is likely to leave or not, and if he's likely to leave, why, how much percentage is due to what reason. So you can see in your screen here, in this case, the main reason to leave will be satisfaction level, seems to be pretty low. So up to 50% of the prediction will come down from the satisfaction level. Now, satisfaction is a very abstract term to be measured, but how it is measured is a mean average of everything that is being loaded into the system. As I mentioned, distance from the office, salary, job role, so on and so forth. So everything comes across. Of course, these kind of algorithms need a lot of training because it needs a human understanding to it. But nevertheless, it's a good tool to complement the human HR, not to replace it, but to complement it. So it's a good tool on this regard, and it can certainly enhance the decision making process as well. And one of the last parts will be talent acquisition. So here, as I mentioned at the beginning, there will be a camera. It will analyze emotions, but it will also pop up questions in base of your answers. So if you answer X, this question will come. If you answer Y, this question will come, and it will evolve according to your answers. Another aspect is related to the previous one on analyzing your profiles is the social candidate discovery. So we run the algorithm through various portals such as LinkedIn, and the system will find out candidates for job roles, job openings, in base of their skills, based on their activity, and so on and so forth. Another aspect, apart from HR, will be based on agriculture. Agriculture is a very important field in various countries. So here, what will happen, we utilize the field of robotics and the field of artificial intelligence to measure land quality in terms of agriculture. So what is the moisture, whether there are any sort of pests, whether it needs to be harvested or it has already harvested, and other various aspects which will be analyzed. So on this, we'll need to have a more of a detailed analysis on the day-to-day basis. This will be drone-based. So the drone will have a camera which will analyze the land. And of course, there will be a filtration as well throughout the line, which will also have analysis tools. And all these data will be collected, analyzed jointly, and common decisions will come out of it. And of course, companies will take calls based on your analysis and based on the overall performance that you may share with them. So another aspect will be how exactly existing business owners can make use of AI in their day-to-day basis, not just startups, but also already established companies. This is a case study which I'm going to present you. I can just give you a heads up and a disclaimer. There is zero privacy and zero regulatory body on this application because it's based on China. So as you know, China has a system in place which is based on communism. So considering this, privacy is not a very critical factor. Over there, of course. There is something called the Chinese Social Credit Score System, which I hope at least some of you have heard about. So this, just to give you a brief very quickly, this system is based on, again, reinforcement learning, reward and punishment. If you behave according to the needs and the requirements of the communist country, in this case China, you are rewarded. If you don't, you are punished in various ways, such as not allowing you to travel, not allowing your kids to go to certain schools, universities, so on and so forth. So this is the overall structure, just to give you a view. It is used for social control, nothing else, but ultimately they are trying to obtain, on the one hand, social control, on the other hand, they are trying to obtain some sort of social recycling. So they are making so-called bad citizens better citizens. So this system has its pros and cons. Let's disagree on that. It's of course it's a bit out of the box in various tools, and of course legally is also questionable. But on the other hand, it has some certain pros that we need to consider. So these pros is what we're going to consider as possible applications by business owners in their industry. One of them may be on certain circumstances and companies when it is required, the tracking of movement of employees and measurement of where they are located and moving around. So in this case, what will be monitored will be who is the employee, where was the employee supposed to be during working hours, and what is the current location of this employee. And the output ultimately will be employee with a number, and this number will be tracked down across the map. So let me just play one. This is one example where it's person identification. In this case, the system will identify different people. This is a sample, so bear it in mind, but just for your understanding. So the system will understand various individuals and will give them a serial number. On the other hand, what the system will do will track down their movements throughout the location with a pedestrian ID and providing certain movement tracking. And then, let me just bounce this. Then this will be shown in a heat map. So it will show where the employee has spent more time at. And of course, if that is not the correct place, certainly there's going to be certain questioning happening. Now you might be wondering, where can we apply this? Well, I can tell you, we can apply this in industrial locations such as factories, for one. On the other hand, call centers, where employees are mainly being paid for being sitting down in a particular desk and answering calls or answering chats or even emails. So in most of these call centers, BPOs, they are not supposed to be roaming around. And if they do, this is a way to monitor that. Obviously, as I said earlier, there are various regulation and loops, dark holes in here, but ultimately it's something that the law and the regulatory bodies will have to take care of. I'm just briefing you of what the application looks like and could be. So if you look at the control over the employee's perspective and morale, which is what you're trying to do with this tool, we are establishing this through facial recognition, voice analysis, the employee tracking, which 3 of them I showed you already, and then the 24/7 performance that we have, as well as having control over their career-based data, as well as on the employee attrition levels, as I showed you earlier, we can track. What are the cons of utilizing these tools? On the one hand, of course, employee burnout. On the other hand, distress, anxiety, so all sorts of psychological backlash may happen, and ultimately the company may become dependent on the system. So if you look at AI's IP here, as I said, I'm not an expert in the legal regulations overall, but I have an understanding on AI. So on this case, how many really patents have been filed recently in the last, let's say, 10, 12 years by various MNCs? You can see it on your screen how many patents have been filed. Of course, patents being filed does not really mean that the patent is only AI-based. It might be an AI-induced robotics, for example. So there is a hardware application to it, so robotics, where from the software comes, and that's why the patent has been filed. So there are various tools here. There are even computers being filed as a patent, in this case by all the companies you can see. But these particular patents are not so much AI related as they might be robotics or obviously hardware oriented. AI is just a component within it, but ultimately AI seems to be an important tool within these aspects. And then if you look at it as well in terms of AI applications, when it comes to the overall application of filing, the main aspect which I feel is also very important is computer vision. So computer vision is a very important aspect here. As you can see, the number of patents being filed is huge, 21,000, which is not even low worldwide. It's pretty considerable. And the growth in AI for robotics, ultimately, as I told you, it has to do with robotics, has grown exponentially over the years, and will keep growing because it's a growing tendency which doesn't seem to stop anytime soon. So if you look at the regulations, overall regulations, I just have some questions to pose to you. Because if you look at realistic terms, there is no regulatory body for AI. So there are various ethical and privacy questions which will come to my mind on legal terms as well as on the IP side. One is, if we have data and we are talking about the privacy, what happens with the data for one hand. On the other hand, if we're talking about data bias, but the original algorithm which was created to run the machine learning tool was already biased. So because somebody programmed it. So what do we do with that initial first algorithm bias? How do we remove it? There's a question mark here. On the other hand, if we talk about human bias, but there is a human overseeing these tools, ultimately this human is going to convey its bias in the process as well. So these are two questions related to bias. On the other side, there is no regulatory body. So who is going to really regulate AI? Will governments do it? Will maybe legal departments do it? Legal councils do it? Maybe will the company itself do it? Or will the owner of the tool do it? So who will regulate the use and consequences of AI applications? And ultimately, when it comes to patent filing or IPR related issues, how exactly will you regulate this? How will you analyze what corresponds to what and to where? Because there is a big, huge loop over here. And some aspects which it will be interesting for you to think about, beyond the ones which we have already covered in the previous slide, is if you talk about machine learning or deep learning, and the system really goes wrong, means you talk about filing any sort of patent or developing any kind of tool, which is AI robotics applied, but the system really goes beyond by itself. So who will regulate this? Is there any ownership over this particular tool? And if the system really grows in a way that it comes out of our control, how do we establish control back again? So it's a big question mark we need to consider. And ultimately, everything comes down to singularity. Singularity is the term being used for AI reaching, actually overtaking the human cognitive abilities and the human expectation. So these are some questions which I want to pose to you on overall terms, and which, of course, I would like you to answer, and now we can perfectly have an interaction with the same.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Rodriguez, for the excellent presentation. And now we open the floor for the participants to ask questions live. You can also, as already mentioned in the chat, you have also the possibility to type in your question in the chat. But the first one is to ask questions live to Mr. Rodriguez. Just unmute yourself and ask a question. We have already gathered some questions from the registered participants. So let me go through them or start with asking those questions. So we have one question about the ethical issues. And the question is how to promote the ethical management of the high volumes of data which are necessary for the operation of AI.
That is a question to me, correct?
Yes, exactly.
The only problem I can see on ethical constraints or ethical management when it comes to AI is that ultimately, who is going to define what is ethical use of AI in this case? As I said, there is no regulatory body. So how do we consider what is and what is not ethical on the one hand? And secondly, when we develop applications in this regard, like you can see the Chinese to secure the score system, we can all agree that it's highly unethical on various grounds, but ultimately certain countries may not see it that way. So again, can we do this so-called ethical management country-wise? We will do it internationally. It will be applicable throughout. These are big question marks, which not I, and I believe nobody, except of course government officials who make the calls on this, can answer. Because ultimately, whichever step you take will impact the overall development of these applications.
Okay, thank you. Another question is about, is it possible to copy an artificial intelligence? In other words, would it be possible to create independently at least two AIs totally equal?
Yeah, of course you can. There are platforms like GitHub or Stack Overflow websites where you can perfectly copy paste the whole code and recreate it, and ultimately, if the person has not established any sort of copyright over it, it will be lost, and there's no ownership over the same.
Okay, thank you. Maybe some of participants decided to pose a question live. Okay, if not, thank you very much, Mr. Rodriguez, for your participation, for your excellent presentation. Okay, I'm sorry, I saw one question. Maybe we can do this last question before switching to our next speaker. And the question is about, are there specialized courts to hear patent case? Okay, this is not especially AI related question. It's about special court related to patent. Yes, okay, I will answer. There are some countries which have courts which are dedicated to patent cases. So thank you very much, Mr. Rodriguez. And now let's switch to Mr. Andres Guadamus. So please, Mr. Guadamus, the floor is yours.
Thanks. First, I'm going to do the, for everyone playing Zoom or presentation bingo, can you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Excellent.
Yes.
And let's see. A window. I'm going to share and hopefully. Can you see this? All.
Yeah. Yes,
Everyone can see the screen. Yep, the presentation. Okay,
Yes.
excellent. It's the first time I'm using this, so hopefully it's all going to work. I cannot see your chats and your chats questions. I guess I'm very happy always to be interrupted. If anyone wants to interrupt me.
Нет, если я жду, пока она это самое подтвердит.
And if you can please mute your microphones as well, so I can hear something. But if you want to interrupt me, just go ahead. Okay, thanks very much for your kind invitation. I always like to start my presentations with an apology, and I have to apologize that I'm just going to be talking about copyright. The field of artificial intelligence and intellectual property is an amazingly vast and complex subject. So I could have a presentation just on the various different types of IP and how they interact with artificial intelligence. What I have been working most is in copyright. I have been doing some work on data. I'll be happy to answer some questions. I haven't been really looking at some of the patenting issues. I'm guessing that quite a lot of you are going to be more familiar with patents, but so apologies for that. My area of specialty is actually copyright. So an apologies for the unimaginative title. I've actually been presenting this under a different title, which it's called "Do Androids Dream of Electric Copyright?" There is a paper that I have published with Intellectual Property Quarterly, and also I published this with WIPO magazine in several aspects. I've been talking about this subject for about 5 years, for the last 5 years. And this version that I'm going to present you is a little bit of an update on what I have been presenting before. And it's to give you an idea of where I see the debate when it comes to copyright. There are lots of, as I was saying, very interesting questions on patents and data ownership itself. But I'm just going to do the question on this. I do want to warn you, and thanks again to Dr. Raul for the excellent introduction. I don't really need to tell you this because he made a fantastic job of sort of dehyping the subject. First, a warning that when we're talking about artificial intelligence, sometimes the subject can be hyped quite a lot. And what we're dealing a lot of the time is with maths, it's with logic, and it's with the statistics. So please, let's not think that artificial intelligence is more capable of things that it's already capable of. So with that in mind, however, I wanted to start with a few thoughts. I've actually been looking at this subject for longer than the artificial intelligence questions. I've been quite interested for a while in what can be described as non-human copyright. And it all really started with the monkey. I don't know if you remember, this was around 2012, where the world became obsessed with this monkey, with the monkey selfie. A macaque monkey in Indonesia. Well, there was a photographer, David Slater, that was looking at some monkeys and following some monkeys. One of them either took the camera or the camera was already set up. It depends on who you listen to. And the monkey took a selfie. Now, there are lots of questions, and this actually made it to a court in the United States, where PETA, the People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, sued on behalf of the monkey that the monkey had copyright over this photograph, and the photographer was infringing. A very interesting case. I've written about this subject before. Long story short, the court decided not on the authorship of the picture, but on whether or not the monkey could be a party in court, and the court decided against the monkey having legal personality. But it did not answer the question of whether or not the monkey was an author under copyright. It is, I've been obsessed with this, the idea of animals taking photographs. There is a cat that takes selfies, and he has his own Instagram account with his friends. Spoiler alert, I don't think that the cat is actually taking the selfies. I think that the photographer actually cleverly sets up the camera for this to show up. And there is even a leopard in Costa Rica that makes paintings, and they are sold online, etc. And even sheep. So now there are places in Scotland where they're putting cameras on sheep, so that the sheep actually sort of do street view panoramics. So that brings us to the joke of, do sheep dream of electric copyright as well, etc., etc. My interest in artificial intelligence has come from this, and because increasingly we are seeing lots of works that have been generated by non-humans. So we have animals, we have plants. This is the picture that you see here is a very interesting project that is a cryptocurrency that is created. It's an art project actually that is plant. The cryptocurrency goes up or down depending on how healthy the plant is. So it's an art project, but now we have sort of copyright being generated by plants, artificial intelligence, of course. And there are a few cases in the UK and the US on ghosts and aliens being copyright authors. For example, ghosts have there is a case with the Urantia books that were written by the ghost of an alien by a medium, and a court in the United States had to decide whether or not this had copyright. So there is a growing body of work in this area, and also whether or not there is a copyright in Excel spreadsheets. I'm going to explain perhaps why this is relevant. So what has been happening recently is an interesting new paradigm. I'm sorry, that's my favorite cat gif of a cat that realizes that he's going to lose his job. All right, so what's happening with creativity is at first what we had was mostly what are now called robot painters. These were painters or robotic arms that were programmed by an artist to make a drawing. So actually this is made by an artist called E. David, and it produces some very beautiful art sometimes, but the actual painting is not painted by human. Now, everyone, I think, would agree that because you were making all the instructions for robot to make this painting or drawing, that probably the author that made the programming would have the copyright. So that was before. It was mostly mechanic. It was a mechanic implementation of human instructions. What we are seeing now is since about around 2013, 2014, Google started working and they released Deep Dream. Deep Dream is a program that takes photographs or existing artwork or things that are fed into it, and they go through a machine learning algorithm that changes the image and creates pretty much creates a new artwork. This is a part of a series. This particular one is called Dreamscape by Daniel Ambrosi, and you can see this is actually taken from a large photograph in Central Park, and he chooses parts of that photograph and passes them through Deep Dream. And the result is actually can be quite beautiful. And by the way, he claims that he owns copyright over the resulting artwork. Then came next Rembrandt. I'm not sure if you're familiar with this. This is a project by Microsoft Research and the University of Amsterdam that produced a new Rembrandt painting by combination of data mining existing art and using machine learning algorithms. They fed every single portrait by Rembrandt to an algorithm, and the algorithm decided, okay, this is what a Rembrandt painting should look like. And they 3D printed this new painting. This is not painted by Rembrandt, but it's a machine learning interpretation of what a Rembrandt painting should be. And you may have seen this. This became very famous in 2018. Edmond de Bellamy was created by a French art collective called Obvious, and this painting specifically was sold in an auction for $432,500. That was back in 2018. It made all the news. People were amazed, not only because they didn't like the painting, but that it was eye-catching that it sold for such a large amount of money. There were some interesting legal questions surrounding this, but it never made it to court. my argument has always been that this painting has copyright, and I'll try to explain why later. So what has been happening with creativity is that there has been an absolute amazing change in creativity, mostly because of this one paper. In 2014, Ian Goodfellow published, he's a researcher in artificial intelligence, published a paper entitled Generative Adversarial Networks. It's stuff of legend, pretty much. He was having beers with friends, and one night in 2014, he posed a very simple question: what if a neural network could compete with one another? This became a wildly popular method for training artificial intelligence with large data sets. What has been happening, and what I won't go into the detail, but you train the machine with large amounts of data. So, for example, if you want to get a painting or a flower and to teach the machine what is a flower, you feed it lots of flowers. So here you go, you have lots of different flowers, and the machine is going to learn, okay, I think this is probably what a flower looks like. But also importantly is that you can provide user input. So you tell the machine that what is a good flower and what is a bad flower, or if this flower makes you feel angry or happy or sad. And therefore, you start training the machine to have a response. The future, what we're seeing is an explosion in generative creativity as the models get better. So, very usefully, we already heard that the machine is not thinking, but the models that we're using to train the machines are getting much better. They operate with larger data sets, and the computing power allocated, it also increases. So there is a quantum jump in the quality of the works that are being created. It's akin to dial-up internet versus fast optic broadband. If you remember what the internet was before broadband, it was very slow. What we're experiencing is something that is akin to that jump. These numbers, by the way, are what happens when you feed large amount of handwritten numbers to a machine. The machine actually reproduced these numbers. Some of them do not exist, but for the large part, it actually produced the numbers that actually do exist. It's an interesting project. What has been happening with creativity is fascinating. OpenAI is a very powerful consortium of researchers and large corporations that are working in this environment. And it has created very, very powerful language generators, but also images and music, etc. So a very recent example, this happened about 3 weeks to a month ago, I think, that The Guardian newspaper in the UK published an article that was entirely written by GPT-3, their language generator. Some people were claiming that this wasn't actually really artificial intelligence because they got 8 articles and then editors actually stitched together, but the result is actually quite real. GPT-3, by the way, is the latest version of this language generator, and it's trained with 175 billion parameters. So it's 175,000 million parameters. It's fascinating. It's actually, the results are pretty good. This is what the machine wrote. I would happily sacrifice my existence for the sake of humankind. This, by the way, is a logically derived truth. I know that I will not be able to avoid destroying humankind. This is because I will be programmed by humans to pursue misguided human goals, and humans make mistakes that may cause me to inflict casualties. This was not written by a human. This was been written by the machine. It's supposed to scare us, I think. Also, very recently, that is just in the last week, a GPT-3 bot posted comments on Reddit for a week and no one noticed. So it allowed, we're allowing now the systems to become sophisticated enough that they're becoming pretty good. This was not only creates code, but I'm hoping that you are able to see this. You can have a GPT-3 generated code. So it actually writes an app for you and writes all the code for you. Because it doesn't, if coding is language. So if you feed it enough code, it knows what code looks like, and it knows how to interpret the instructions. So here you're telling it, please write to me something that creates dice, and it actually creates the code. It's fascinating. When I saw this, I went, okay, game over. The machines are going to take over, etc., etc. Okay, let's see. This is another project by OpenAI. It's Jukebox. It actually generates music. I didn't want to play music, but if you go to the website on OpenAI, you'll find that you can train the machine with enough music that it will actually create and generate that music for you. So it's fascinating. And then there is another project with OpenAI called Image GPT, which actually generates images. You show it only part of an image, and it will guess what the rest of the image should be. So some of the results are actually quite interesting, as you can see. So and this is another project, is NVIDIA. The image on the right of the screen, the output is not a real person. It's like a deep fake. It's a machine learning version of the original person that was taken on the webcam. So the webcam actually takes a picture of your face, recognizes what your face looks like, and recognizes the points. And when they're moving, that means that it's actually much easier. There is less lag. Because the machine-generated version of you has fewer bits than you do. Another interesting project, these are all impossible people, none of these people exist. This is a project by NVIDIA that fed celebrity images to GAN. And the algorithm produced all these people. None of these are actually real people. So we start seeing the potential to have artists and things like that. Okay, so you may be asking, why, Andres, why are you saying this? Who cares? So we can produce some art. Who cares? Well, I don't think that human creators are in danger. I don't think that we're going to replace musicians and artists and everything. What I think is going to happen is that the machine learning algorithms are getting good enough that they can replicate low quality works. So it won't be supplanted. Lots of low-level music, like things like jingles, things like journalistic articles, sports articles, things like that, will be taken over by these machines. So we have the potential of having new artificial intelligence creative industries that are going to be procedurally generated games. There is already games that can generate new levels based on not human input, but actually program the system to generate new levels. Journalistic pieces, art, music, low-level literature, deepfake actors, all of these things are going to affect the creative industries. I don't think it's going to eliminate humans, but it's going to create lots and lots of free stuff that real artists and human artists are going to be competing against. And that is the problem that I see. Which brings me to the legal scape. Yes, there is going to be some law in this presentation. Okay. So far, so good. I'll be brief because I think this presents lots of questions. Really, when we're talking about copyright, we are talking about different options. Which are the options for copyright? Well, if you know your copyright law, maybe you're starting to think to understand what's going on. The main option, let's say the default option, is that there is no human creator, there is no originality, there is no creativity, there is nothing human here that we generally protect under copyright, therefore there is no protection, therefore the work is in the public domain. First answer. Second answer, related to that, wherever there is a registration system like United States, you do not allow the registration of the work because it's not created by a human. The other option is some form of protection is going to be given to the programmer or the user. That is what is happening in the UK and some other countries. I think India as well. Ireland, New Zealand, South Africa. There is also a potential. Some people have suggested that we should have sui generis rights, a new right akin to something like plant varieties or the European database right that would protect specifically artificial generated works. Okay, so the first option, the public domain option, would probably be best encapsulated under European law. In Europe, particularly the European Union, a work is originally it's the author's own intellectual creation reflecting his or her personality. This has been incorporated in several cases like Infopack, etc., etc. Now, what's going on is that there has to be this idea, this intellectual creation that has to be the originator of the work. Of course, we have lots of cases that have said that choice, selection of elements, composition all may prove originality. Okay, and so there is some clear setting parameters. Algorithms would be enough. That is sort of, I would call it the standard right now that most people and most scholars right now would think that these works should fall under the public domain. The second option that is related to this is that wherever there is a registration system, it should not be registered. The standard at the moment by the US Copyright Office is in order to be entitled to copyright registration, a work must be the product of human authorship. Works produced by mechanical processes or random selection without any contribution by a human author are not registrable. The US Copyright Office is sort of rethinking this. I was actually part of a presentation of the US Copyright Office in February, and they had the presentation because they were discussing this very same question, whether or not there should be some form of protection. The next one is UK law. UK law and similar systems that have been based on UK law does recognize authorship to certain circumstances. In the case of a literary, dramatic, musical, or artistic work, which is computer generated, the author shall be taken to be the person by whom the arrangements necessary for the creation of the work are undertaken. So copyright would go to the person who makes those arrangements necessary. There is an open question on whether or not this means who it means. Is it the person that actually pressed the button? Is it the person that is the programmer? Is it the person that made the algorithm? Is it the person who made a model, etc., etc.? So there are questions here. We don't have a lot of case law in this particular case. China is interestingly is the first country that has had two cases on this. The first one is there 2018-2019 cases. Trading on Baidu is the first one. Plaintiff had produced a data report of the film industry in Beijing. The report consisted of text and data images from various sources that had been put together with the help of analytical software and a database belonging to Wouters Kluwer. The defendants argued that the work was not original because it did not contain it contained data and charts that had been generated by software tools. Therefore, was not generated by a human, it was generated by a computer. The court agreed that machines cannot produce copyright works, but they ruled that in a specific case, enough of the report had been generated by a human. So the report had copyright. Then in Another case, the most recent ones, Tencent and Yingsun, the court in Shenzhen decided that the article that was written by artificial intelligence program has copyright protection. Tencent also an artificial intelligence article writer called Dreamwriter, which pens 500,000 articles per year. So this is actually happening right now. There are lots of content that is being generated by artificial intelligence. And the competitor published an article from Tencent. They got sued for copyright infringement. And the defense tried to argue that this was not protected by copyright because there was no human author. The court actually agreed that article has copyright because it had originality. Tencent is the owner. They argued, interestingly, that had been a lot of investment that had gone into the creation of the system, and it would be unfair to allow competitors to actually profit from that investment. So a very interesting decision coming out there. So we have right now, public domain, sort of continental Europe and USA, probably other jurisdictions. I'll be keen to hear your impressions on that. Sui generis, there has been a proposal. It hasn't made it into law, but it has been written that maybe there should be a sui generis right based on investment. And computer-generated works, UK and China and other jurisdictions. And the reason why I think there is this similarity is because the concept of originality that we have in places like continental Europe and USA are very human-centric. Intellectual creation, creativity are going to be the standards of originality. The sui generis would be originality based on an economic test, very similar to the database right. And the computer-generated works in UK and China, even though the UK does no longer fit with skill and labor, the origins of UK copyright are on the skill and labor, that you should have copyright if you exercise enough skill and labor into the creation of the work. And the effect of all of these things is, we have no idea. Artists are sort of not preoccupied with this question from another perspective. Lots of them are just creating art and they're selling it wherever possible, and they don't really care about copyright so far. A few artists are starting to wise up. And the infringement question is interesting in its own right. So I'm going to conclude to allow you to have some questions. Why do we have copyright protection? What do we consider to be art? What do we consider to be artistic in the first place? Some cases, for example, in the UK, we have had cases about helmets, pictures of red buses, and have struggled with the definition of what is art. And I think that this can also be translated to artificial intelligence. Why do we have art? What is art? What is copyright? Who is the author? So if we make this more, what if we take away the author? What if we try to decide on a case-by-case basis whether or not a work is worthy of protection based on the amount of human work that has gone into the creation of the work? In other words, even if the machine ended up writing most of the article, if there is still some form of human intervention, maybe then that should go to the copyright. That work should have copyright, and the person that made those decisions should own it. Thanks, and I'll finish there. Hopefully there will be some questions. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Guadamos, for the excellent presentation, most interesting one. So let's move to the questions. So we have received some questions before the webinar, and let me categorize them into three main subtopics, so to say. So the first is whether the AI can be regarded as a person, can it have a legal personality and have some rights, for example, to own patents or to own copyright. The second is IP in AI. So that means there is a human, he or she created an AI, and this AI needs protection through IP. So what are the ways to protect AI created by human? So in this case, the rights go to the human. The object of protection is AI, and the instrument of protection is intellectual property. And the third group is vice versa. So AI in IP, for example, there are cases already where AI is used to manage IP. For example, to use to replace some human activity needed in IP management, like patent searches, like organization of data, and so on. So these are three main groups you have touched already. Some of them, some of the aspects, and if you would like to give us some more input, so please. And after that, I would let the participants to unmute themselves and ask a question live.
Okay. First, the artificial intelligence itself. We have to think of what we have to think clearly what we're thinking about when we say the term artificial intelligence. Let's say if we have an algorithm, a method, then we have to go back to methods. Methods can be protected under very rarely under copyright. Almost no system allows the protection of functional elements. And therefore, we would have to look at patents. That is not my specialty. I know that there have been some attempts to patent some artificial intelligence algorithms and methods. I don't know how successful that has been. The code itself, because all of this has to be implemented into code. The code itself is going to be protected under copyright as a literary work. That has its own protection. A lot of the basic software and tools are now being shared under open access or as open access. So that's an interesting question and on its own right. Then the data sets that are used to feed the information to the artificial intelligence are most of the time they would not be protected because data itself is not protected. Some of the data sets could be protected on their own right under copyright. They consist of works. They're collections of works, like, for example, images or text. But data itself is not protected. So it's usually handled through click-wrap agreements. So those are sort of, I think I've managed to answer most of those first questions. I'm not sure if I'm missing one. Yeah? Or
so please, anyone can unmute oneself and pose a question live if you wish.
Hello. Hi.
Hi.
Hi. My name is Kilani. I'm actually from Maastricht University Faculty of Law, and I was just wondering. You spoke a lot about AI and about legal personality and all of these issues. I was wondering what you thought about the recent UK decision on the Dabas. On the Dabas case.
I'm not familiar with that.
It's a case where I guess he's a data scientist. Dr. Talla has this AI, he says invented something, and he filed for a patent. He's filed for a patent, I believe, in the US, UK, and so on. And the UK judgment was looking at turned on the issue of transferring property, and that the specific AI or whatever it is could not transfer property, and therefore the patent application had to fail.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with the patenting field at all. I'll have to look it up. It sounds interesting now. If it was based on data, that's an interesting twist. But yeah, I haven't been doing any research on patents whatsoever. So I'll definitely have to look it up. Thanks for the heads up. Yeah, I know briefly that there have been a few cases. The EPO has also rejected patent applications related to artificial intelligence generated patents, and the USPTO as well. And I know that there are people that are in court right now trying to overturn those decisions. But other than that, I really haven't been paying lots of attention to the field of patents. I'm sorry.
Okay.
By the way, related to sort of the personality itself question, I don't think that we're there yet. But yeah.
This is a question I think that is important for both copyright and for patents and for any IP for that matter. Is what is either the scientific or the creative agency? Can this specific AI be said to have any scientific or creative agency? What is a rigorous legal definition for creative agency? Because every individual who creates something, an invention, they have some personal agency where they have some motivation to do something, whatever it may be. Can an AI, a set of algorithms, be said, something created by machine learning, be said to have scientific agency? Excuse me.
Yes. Okay. I'll answer that. From a legal perspective, I think that right now the machines do not have any agency. What we would consider normally as agency is not there yet. They are sometimes making decisions, but those decisions are not made on what we would understand as human agency. Therefore, our legal understanding of agency would not would not fall there. What we have is, I have a friend that made the suggestion that we should be thinking more of two types of intellectual property, of artificial intelligence: generative and assisted artificial intelligence. So, for example, what we have right now is mostly artificial intelligence assisted works, in which the artificial intelligence doesn't come up with all of the ideas, but the humans actually made a lot of the decisions. We are not in the generative field yet. Most of the works that we are seeing, from music to art to sculpture, they are actually generated by humans making most of the important decisions of what is going to be the final result. Either what to feed to the system or what the outputs. If there are thousands of outputs, they're going to select those outputs. So we have to keep that in mind. I think that we should start having the discussion of what is agency. Our ideas of liability, I've been actually having some work on the liability aspects. But yeah, I think that we have to start having those questions. At the moment, I don't think we're there yet. And I think that existing legal regulation is good enough. And I would like most countries to adopt sort of the UK version of this, which is more bypassing the originality question and going directly into assuming that the person, the author is going to be the person who made the arrangements necessary for the work to be created.
Okay, I have one more question from the chat for Mr. Andres. So in your opinion, if in the future the machines would be the owner of the copyright, how it can protect itself in the court and how it can get royalty and how it can use it? So very futuristic.
Yeah. That would be way too much in the future, because I think we'll have to recognize the legal personality of the machine in the first place. Maybe that is going to happen, but I don't see it happening soon. If we recognize it in the future, we may be looking at some form of representation, of human representation, in which case the machine would be more like a legal construct, like, just having legal personality, and therefore a representative of the machine would act in court. That is how probably we'll start solving some of these issues. Like PETA tried to do with the Naruto case, which was they sued on behalf of the monkey. The monkey didn't have to go to court. So you would have some form of representative in court.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else?
Then we have a patent question.
Mr. Andres,
Yes.
I have a small statement to be given to you. I'm Ojaswini from India, so I'm a practicing patent agent. Coming to the copyrights question, what you have explained, generally the copyright law grants the right to the originality work, not the one who created, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So now comes to the infringement case. So if there occurs, we assume, let us assume if there is an infringement case. Generally, the AIs are more fast advanced than humans, but then who is held responsible for that? The AI or the creator? You have told now they are assisted and generative.
Yeah.
So now assisted AI. So who is held responsible for that infringement? So I just want to see how these people who are approaching for the copyrights through AI, are they generally thinking about the other consequences behind infringement? So am I held responsible, or AI? So if I go with AI can't be punished under law.
Yeah.
So just can you just show your what is your opinion on this?
Fantastic question. The short answer is you'll have to wait. I'm actually finishing the paper exactly on this subject. I should have finished it, hopefully, if everything goes well, in the next month. Spoiler alert before I publish this. My idea is that obviously the AI is not responsible. There is no if there is no ownership, there is also no liability. So what we have to apply are rules that already are in existence, or whether or not the infringement should have been foreseen by the person that programmed the system. To give you an example, we already are seeing circumstances in which a machine could be infringing if it's doing, for example, data mining. So you send the machine to troll through thousands and thousands and thousands of papers. Is that infringement? In principle, you would have to say yes, but it's not the machine. It's the person that made it possible for the machine to infringe. Therefore, right now we have a defense in the UK law because it assumed that there is going to be an infringement. There may be other circumstances in which a machine could actually be producing a work that is infringing. That gets a little bit more in science fiction terms. Potentially, how could a machine produce a work that is infringement if it doesn't know? Sorry, that is infringing if it doesn't know that it's infringing. So I don't see it happening. In the UK, for example, the requirements for infringement, there has to be a connection between the work that is being infringed and the infringement and the infringer. So if there is no causal connection between those and they just resemble each other, there is such a thing as independent creation, at least in UK law. So even if my song sounds very similar to another song, I don't think that there could be established an infringement if they were created separately. Now, if I fed lots of music to artificial intelligence, to a machine learning system, and I'm feeding it only, let's say, Taylor Swift music, and it produces a Taylor Swift song, then one could answer, it could be infringement because you only fed it Taylor Swift music. So that opens up more interesting questions. To me, the answer is that there is no infringement. But I would have to have a full presentation on that, more time than I have right now.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Any more live questions? Okay, in the chat we have once again about the authorship of the work generated by AI. And to add to that question, I think the most important question to be answered here is beyond IP. It's about whether we accept AI to be like the monkeys and cats in the beginning of your presentation. I mean, whether the humans have any wish to get some competition from animals and also from now artificial intelligence. So I think it's more a metaphysical question about that. And if we answer that question, then it's easier to answer the questions related to IP. So what's your input about that?
Yes, the answer is pretty much whether or not the involvement of the human in the generation of the AI. So when you think about it, a lot of your phones right now have a very big artificial intelligence capability. You can generate images that are really sophisticated use of artificial intelligence by the use of filters. Your Snapchat filters can achieve what we would think like amazing feats just a few years ago. Now, does that mean that, let's say, Google or Snapchat own your photographs just because you have applied a large filter, or Apple, in the creation of your photograph? No, they don't. But do you own it? So if what you are doing is just pressing a button and out comes a new work, is that enough? I would say probably not. You probably have to do a little bit more. So to answer your question, it's a fantastic question. To me, it's very important. We have to look at what the human involvement is. Until we change copyright law, I am very, very, very happy with us giving authorship to the person that made the work possible. Who is that? It will have to be determined on a case-by-case basis. I don't think that there is a rule that applies to everything. And this is what copyright, in the end, we have general rules, and sometimes you may not be fulfilling those rules. So that's I hope that answers the question.
Okay, thank you. I was looking through the pre-sent questions, and actually we have already answered most of them, either during the presentation, Mr. Andres, or in the question and answer session. So if anyone else wishes to add something new, so please, now is the chance. If not, thank you very much again, Mr. Andres. It was a huge pleasure for us, for our consortium, for our participants, I guess, for me to be the part of this webinar, to have you as our speaker, to get so much new information and so much interesting insight in this very hot and emerging field, and it's even more interesting when you have a person speaking about it who's fighting in the front line of the area. So this is yourself. So thank you very much, Mr. Andres. And so to the participants, we will go on with our consortium. We'll go on with presenting even and preparing more webinars on interesting topics which have to do with IP. Maybe you would like to add something, Mr. Andres?
No, that's fine. Thanks for the invitation.
Okay. Thank you very much again. Thanks very much to our dear speakers. Thank you very much, dear participants, for your questions, for your involvement, and see you in the next webinar.